Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's jump right into what I think is a completely fascinating puzzle in modern higher education. We're asking, does a genuine university badge always answer the specific question an online learner actually has? It's a scenario we see all the time these days, and frankly, it's one of the most important intellectual questions we face when we talk about quality assurance.
Here is how we're going to break this down today. We'll start with the familiar landscape, move on to how legal equivalence is completely settled, decode the various signals out there, look at India's robust regulatory architecture, compare conventional versus online realities, and finally, wrap up with the concept of the right badge answering the wrong question.
All right, part 1. The familiar landscape of navigating credentials.
Let's start with a situation you've probably encountered if you've ever spent time researching an online degree. Imagine you're scrolling through a university's webpage. You see a NAAC A++ grade, a super strong NIRF rank, and a UGC entitled Online MBA, all proudly displayed right there at the top. Now, I want to be absolutely clear right out of the gate. These can all be 100% genuine credentials. No one is making anything up. But the real question, the intellectually curious question we have to ask ourselves is, do they all represent the same kind of quality assurance? Are they really answering the exact question an online learner has about the actual digital environment where they'll be spending their time studying?
Moving on to part 2, legal equivalence is settled. We need to establish the baseline here. Before we get into the weeds and untangle these badges, we've got to establish a fundamental truth so we know exactly what is and what isn't up for debate. The legal equivalence, it is completely settled. Under the UGC regulatory framework in India, recognized or entitled online and open and distance learning awards are treated as legally equivalent to their corresponding conventional on-campus awards. This legal parity is incredibly real, and we are absolutely not questioning that today. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. Qualification equivalency is a legal statement about the standing of the award itself. It's legal parity, but it absolutely does not mean that the learning environments or the pedagogy or how learners interact with faculty have to be identical. The degree can be completely equivalent while the learning environment is, by its very nature, fundamentally different. Okay, part 3. Let's decode these signals and really unpack the badges. Now that we've secured that baseline, let's break down the different quality signals that usually just get blended together into one big marketing message. You see, we're actually looking at 6 completely distinct concepts here. Institutional accreditation judges the whole university. Program accreditation judges a specific degree. UGC-DEB recognition, that's a regulatory permission. A NIRF ranking is a comparative score. Qualification equivalence is legal parity. And finally, mode-specific quality evidence is proof of what learners actually experience online. The central trap we fall into, the big reasoning error in the sector, happens when we treat just one of these distinct signals as a magical substitute for all the others. Take NAAC, for example. A NAAC A++ is a genuine, incredibly impressive marker of institutional health. It speaks volumes about the university's overall governance and its resources. But historically, and just conceptually speaking, an institutional grade is not an automatic, independent accreditation of the specific online delivery mode. Stating a university has an A++ is factually accurate for sure, but implying the online MBA itself was independently accredited with that A++, well, that requires a completely different set of evidence.
It's the exact same story with a strong NIRF ranking in the management category. It evaluates broad, vital dimensions like research output, professional practice, and campus resources. It is a fantastic category signal. However, unless the methodology explicitly states it, that ranking doesn't separately certify the online experience. A strong institution obviously has great resources that benefit all modes of study, but the rank itself just isn't an online-specific quality audit.
And then, of course, you've got regulatory statuses. UGC-DEB uses different routes, like eligible and entitled. The entitled route, which is linked to higher NAAC or NIRF thresholds, is a really powerful permission. It lets qualifying institutions offer up to 13 online programs without getting prior approval. But remember, this entitlement grants regulatory legitimacy to operate based on past institutional thresholds. It's basically a permission slip to start. It is not a fresh, external judgment of how successfully that online program is currently being delivered to a student sitting at their computer today. Which brings us to part 4, India's robust regulatory architecture and moving beyond basic compliance. Now, I want to be super clear here. This sector is absolutely not the Wild West, not even a little bit. India actually has a highly structured, robust system in place for this. UGC-DEB prescribes a really substantial regulatory architecture. Universities have to have program project reports, a center for internal quality assurance, proper learning management systems, and strict assessment integrity protocols. The regulation exists, and it's comprehensive. So the question is not, is online education regulated in India? It absolutely is. The real quality assurance question is how effectively this compliance is actually converted into transparent evidence that the learning process is genuinely working for the learner. Let's dig into that in Section 5, comparing the realities of conventional versus online learning. Think about it like this. How do we actually measure success in an environment that is fundamentally different from a physical campus? The core difference is pretty straightforward. Conventional learning relies on physical presence. If a student doesn't show up to a lecture hall, their absence is immediately physically visible. Online learning, though, relies on LMS architecture, digital content, and virtual support. And listen, neither environment is automatically superior to the other, but in an online setting, disengagement can be incredibly quiet. A learner might log into the LMS, sure, but an LMS login doesn't inherently prove meaningful learning is happening. Just having a bunch of digital content available doesn't prove it was actually consumed or understood. Because this online reality is so different, a mature quality system really needs to hit 4 specific steps. First, you confirm compliance structures actually exist. Second, you track meaningful learner engagement. Third, you monitor progression and completion. And fourth, you prove that the intended outcomes are actually achieved. This right here shows exactly why we have to move beyond just checking a box that a digital platform exists. We need to step toward proving that learners are persisting, getting quick academic feedback, and truly mastering the competencies. Finally, Section 6, right badge, wrong question, and a quick look at the global context. To see how this shift toward mode-specific outcomes is unfolding, if we zoom out globally for a second, and this isn't to say foreign systems are better than India's, they're really just different frameworks, we can see a shared concern. Regulatory bodies like TQSA in Australia and the Office for Students in England explicitly look for outcome evidence tied directly to the mode of delivery. The European standards and guidelines use common standards, yeah, but they expect evidence appropriate to different environments. The global consensus is everywhere. The delivery context matters immensely when you're assessing quality. So, what does this all mean for us? Well, universities should definitely celebrate their hard-earned credentials. A NAAC grade and a NIRF rank are massive, massive achievements. But we've got to understand the boundaries of what those credentials actually assess. Recognition and entitlement establish vital regulatory legitimacy, yes, but they simply cannot carry the entire burden of demonstrating day-to-day educational quality inside a digital classroom. It really comes down to this brilliant summary from our source material. The problem is not the badge. The problem is expecting one badge to answer a question it was never designed to answer. The issue isn't that an institutional grade is deceptive. It's not. The issue is that online learners are expecting an overarching institutional badge to answer a highly specific question about how supported, engaged, and successful they will personally be on a digital learning platform. And that leads to the final provocative thought I want to leave you with today. An equivalent degree deserves equally serious quality assurance, not identical delivery, but evidence appropriate to the mode. If we really want online education to thrive, we have to demand evidence that reflects the reality of how online learners actually study. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the right questions.